mic, right?
Yes, I'll turn it on.
All right. I begged Brian to give me that introduction, so I got to thank him for doing that. I didn't think he'd go through it. Yeah. So, you know, when I saw Rosemary's Piece for the first time, I guess maybe like a lot of you here, the sort of people that would be inclined to come to a literary event, it was the books that got me, just the endless cycle of books, and oh my God, I mean, how many do you have? How many do I have? They're all over my apartment.
Different piles. Oh, there we go. Oh yeah, listen to that. Listen to that. Those rich tones. So I thought that I would just grab a couple of books from my own collection and talk about them, and maybe some of the stories behind them. And the books that I've chosen to talk about are the books that I have autographed by the author through whatever set of circumstances they came into my possession. The great thing about doing Talking Image Connection is that Allison expects you to have your pieces to her a week before the performance. So if you have any inclination of following along in the chapbook, I would beg you to not do so. Because the version of this I'm going to read is slightly different than the one that you have. And if the differences are that important to you, please see me after the show, and I will email you a copy of the final version. So the first book is Adverbs, written by Daniel Handler. The legend in the book, what it says on the inside is, I wrote this book, signed Daniel Handler, 7.XII.2007. Of all the signed author books I own, this is the one that I dislike the most. I forget exactly how I came into possession of it. All I can say is that I am sure that I never set out to own it, and I am positive that it was not signed personally by the author for me in my presence. In fact, now that I think about this, I'm pretty sure that I picked it up at the offices of a beloved, now-defunct arts and literature magazine here in the Twin Cities from a pile of books in the kitchenette that had a sign next to it reading, "Please take one free." A pile of review books sent to the magazine by eager publishers wishing for the magazine's writers to take them and read them and write glowing reviews of them in this beloved, now-defunct arts and literature magazine. A quick search on the archives of the magazine in question suggests that no writer took up the publisher on this generous offer. Of course, this was all in the final days of the magazine, so perhaps a fleeting writer left it behind accidentally, and it somehow got mixed in with the small press poetry anthologies and memoirs of minor 20th century television stars. Would a publisher be so desperate to have their book reviewed that they'd stoop to sending signed copies of the book to magazines? Did they have Daniel Handler locked in a room, churning these out? It's hard to say. And I can't tell you if my own motives for picking up the book were cynical or not. I mean, did I cynically think that maybe I could sell the book on eBay, despite the fact that I've never sold anything on eBay before, and I'm not sure why I might be moved to begin such a sideline at that specific point in time? Or if my intentions were pure, was I thinking, okay, well, you know what, I'll give it a try. I'll give Daniel Handler a try. He wrote those overstuffed, unbearably arch novels for teenagers. I didn't like those books, but you know, enough grown adult NPR-type people liked them, or enough liked them to champion them to other grown adult NPR-type people, and all this made Daniel Handler famous enough to hang out with Stephen Merritt from the Magnetic Fields, who's actually a pretty famous person in the circles that I travel in. So who am I to write the guy off? Let's give him a shot. Adverbs was supposedly the book that he wrote that he was finally, going to get to write for adults. And I'm an adult, so maybe this will be all right. Of course, as soon as I read the specifics of the cutesy, self-deprecating notation in the front flap and the XII in place of the numeral 7 or the word July, I immediately realized it was not going to be all right. In fact, it made the experience worse for me. It was like Daniel Handler was making fun of me for owning his stupid book. I gave up after about 25 pages. Look, all right, if you think I've got the wrong idea about Daniel Handler, and maybe I do, and you would like to own this book for your own personal library, let me know following the show, and I will mail you my signed copy of this book. I understand that tastes vary from person to person, and that you may very well be the sort of person that enjoys the kind of short fiction that he writes, and I think that's fine. A signed copy of a book should go to a home where it's loved. If you disagree with me on this idea, though, and your intentions are secretly mercenary and you'd still like the book, I will simply tell you that signed paperback copies of Daniel Handler's Adverbs are going for about $18 on eBay as of about 3 days ago. The second book is a book called Big Whale at the Cracker Factory by Mickey Hess. the legend inside says, Andy, Minneapolis can't handle the rock, signed Mickey. Mickey was the first writer I ever saw read short fiction in a bar in my hometown of Louisville sometime in the year 2001. He was wearing a plastic blonde superhero wig, and he read short stories about going to rap shows and teaching English to college freshmen as an adjunct professor and working on literary projects with dirtbags, or the sorts of dirtbags that I was hanging around with in the year 2001. So this particular night, he was reading for maybe a dozen audience members. And I should say this bar, when I say it was a bar where he was reading, it wasn't like a cool art bar, it was actually like a hick bar, kind of. And he was actually opening for My Lousy Garage Band because some booker lost to history had somehow been convinced that it would be a great idea to have a writer and a terrible garage band play a show together. But when I watched him perform, the people in the bar liked Mickey a lot better than they liked us because Mickey was funny and he was entertaining. And we were a bunch of serious 20-year-olds that thought we were America's only legitimate heirs to the legacy of Lou Reed, which is to say we were not funny. And we were not particularly entertaining. And seeing a writer, read their work in a bar is maybe something that, you and I take for granted now because we're all here together in a contemporary art space and we're listening to a reading, which means that I think basically we can agree that we understand that literature and poetry and fiction and spoken word can live and flourish outside the context of a traditional venue. But when I was 21 years old, it seemed like the most punk rock thing a person could do, just like reading your stuff in a bar. And it had never occurred to me that you could read stories outside a bookstore or a coffee shop. So I think it's fair to say that I'm here today in this soap factory reading you these true stories about some of my possessions because of Mickey and his plastic wig and his weird short stories from that book. Next book is Elvis Presley by Bobby Ann Mason. Now, it's just a signature on the title page with a very neat penmanship. It's not personalized to me, but it does have a signed author copy sticker on the front, as well as the name of the defunct independent bookstore it came from, which in some ways is even more poignant than the fact that it's signed by the author. Now, Bobby Mason lives and teaches not far from my hometown, near this defunct bookstore in Kentucky. So I imagine part of her job as an author was to drive around the state in a pickup truck with assigned copies of the book in the back, and then just dropping them off in independent bookstores and saying, here you go, and leaving them for people like me to buy. Now, I planned on buying the book at some point anyway, because I love books about Elvis, and just the pile that said signed by the author was really kind of appealing. So, I bought one. And in the book, Mason describes her father seeing Elvis on TV for the first time on the Ed Sullivan Show. And instead of the typical, what the hell is that trash kind of reaction you might expect in this kind of book, the dad actually slaps his knees and goes, boy, he's good. And the whole book's like that. It's this really exuberant biography. It's one of the best I've read about Elvis. And I've read more biographies of Elvis than probably anyone besides Richard Nixon. And so, having a signed copy of a book that you really enjoy, even if it's not made out to you personally, it just fills you with this kind of knee-slapping, boy, this is good, exuberance. Because, when you think back on the book, you remember not only the details of the intangible part, the experience of reading the book, but you also think about the book itself as a tangible object of value that you have that ties you directly back to the author. Next book is Cheap Novelties, The Pleasures of Urban Decay by Ben Ketcher. This is a book of surreal, Ben Ketcher, absolutely. This book of surreal, deadpan, New York-based cartoons is made out to Andrew Sturdevant, with a little drawing of Julius Knipple, the hero of the book, made on the inside cover. Now, the reason it's made out to Andrew is because I bought the book via Ben Ketcher's website with a Visa card, and my Visa card has the name Andrew R. Sturdevant. So when he looked up the credit card information, he probably saw my name and just wrote that. So I actually think, who's Andrew? When I look at this dedication sometimes. When I was a child, my family had a copy of William Armstrong's young adult classic, Sounder, and it was made out to Andy and Mason. It took me years to realize the book was made out to me and my brother, and my brother's not named Mason, he's named Nathan. Andy and Nathan, not Andy and Mason. So I wonder if it would have changed my perception of the book when I read it as a child and thought, wow, good old William Armstrong really wanted me and my brother to read this. He wanted us to have this. Instead, mostly for years, I just thought, God, I wonder if Andy and Mason know we have their book. Who are those guys? Sadly, some of the intimacy is lost. And so the last book that I have signed is a book of short stories called Barney's Crew by Sean Carswell. And it says in the inside, Andy, next time I hope you can open for us, Sean. Very sweet. Barney's Crew is a short story from the title of this volume, and it's one of my favorite object lessons in building a really great joke throughout the course of a narrative and then blowing it up at the end. It's a short story that unfolds perfectly, and if I taught writing classes, I would make copies of it and hand it out to students that were interested in humor on the first day of class because it's so perfectly laid out. Now, I met Sean Carswell when he was on tour with Mickey Hess. And he wrote that really gracious note on the inside. And he knew something about gracious notes because on the front of the book, there's this amazing blurb that he somehow got from the late Howard Zinn. And Howard Zinn actually said, Sean Carswell's stories are cutting. They will make you laugh, and they will make you think. Now, when I read that, the first thing I thought of was the Dr. Frank theme song from The Simpsons, which is the one that goes, Professor Frank, he'll make you laugh, he'll make you think, he does the thing, and then... So I said, Sean, it's just like the Professor Frink thing. And he didn't find that very funny because I was obviously not the first person that had pointed that out to him. But that should not detract from the fact that this book was blurbed by Howard Zinn. Howard Zinn was a finite person. He could only blurb so many books over the course of his life, and it's sad to think that now he will never blurb another book again. And it makes you think that Sean Carswell, as an author, is a finite person, and he can only sign so many books before he will never sign another one again. And I have one of those books. And then someday, that's all that's going to be left, is those books. And hopefully, they'll be in someone's possession that cares about them, not spending their afterlives migrating from the kitchenette area of defunct literary magazines in the Twin Cities to the hands of disinterested eBay bidders, and then back and forth, and back and forth, and back and forth again. Thanks.